Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 114 of the podcast. It's the 7th of March, 2018, as I record this intro. And this week on the podcast, I speak with Hema Bharadwaj. Hema is an unschooling mom with 2 children and an amazing artist. Hema and I talk about her illustrations for my new book, The Unschooling Journey, a Field Guide. She talks about the inspiration behind the images and shares wonderful stories about her own unschooling journey. Our conversation spanned almost 2 hours, so I decided to break it into 2 parts to give you more time to savor her stories and insights. And that means part 2 will come out next week. And if you'd like to see the illustrations that we're talking about, be sure to check out the episode transcript. I added them alongside our conversation so that you can see some of the aspects that we reference. Now, as a personal update this week, I just want to say thanks so much to everyone who has bought a copy of the book. I am thrilled with the feedback so far. I love that the book and the ideas are resonating with you guys. And I've received 2 lovely editorial reviews. Rachel Rainbolt wrote, "In The Unschooling Journey, a Field Guide, Pam Laricchia extends an invitation to frame our deschooling process as a hero's journey. This deep and beautiful storying of the transition into unschooling pulls from literary hero monomyths to inspire new meaning for our own journeys off the mainstream path and into connection, trust, and adventure with our children." And Ellen Rowland wrote, "Every journey deserves a journal. This one is a treasure. This is the book I wished I'd had years ago when we began unschooling our 2 children. Beautifully illustrated and full of wisdom and encouragement, Pam's latest book accompanies us through the stages of our own journey, guided by examples rooted in storytelling, legends, and mythology, as well as her many years of experience unschooling her own children. Its meaning crosses the threshold of learning with freedom and unfolds in ways that ask us to seriously question and playfully explore the lives we live with our children." Thanks to you both, and I truly hope that you guys find the book helpful as you navigate the twists and turns of your own unschooling journey. And a huge thank you to everyone who has chosen to support the show on Patreon. I deeply appreciate all my patrons and their generous support. It's vital to helping me share unschooling information and inspiration with anyone who wants to explore the fascinating world of unschooling. If you'd like to help support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And this week's quote is from Hema. "My spirit got unschooling. I got it. I had wanted that all my life, but all the parts of me that had gone through school, that had been raised by parents who were doing their best and saying, 'Hey, we need you to learn this and this and this. Only if you learn this will you be successful in life.' All of that was getting shaken up." She's talking about the illustration that we ended up using on the book cover as well, called Transitions, and it's related to stage 5 of our unjourney, embracing beginner's mind. I love the way she describes that beautiful yet challenging dichotomy when our spirit gets it, but all those parts of us that have absorbed those conventional messages around learning and parenting for so long are being shaken to their core. Things almost always seem worse at night, don't they? Our fears become scarier, more urgently in need of an answer right now. Yet, even in the darkness, the beautiful possibilities of unschooling call to us. And I think Hema did an incredible job of conveying those feelings, of putting us right there in that moment. And with that, let's get to my conversation with Hema. Hi everyone, I'm Pamela Rickia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Hema Bharadwaj. Hi Hema!
Hi!
Hello. Just a bit of background for everyone. I've known Hema for many years now, first online in unschooling groups, and then we met in person over the years at various conferences and gatherings. And then in 2016, I came across and connected deeply with Hema's art. So I was working on my book about the unschooling journey, which is through the lens of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which I've been working on for 3 years. And I had come across many illustrations of the hero's journey online. And soon after seeing Hema's work, I could not shake the idea of illustrating the unschooling journey for my book. So I reached out to her and we soon began a super fun side quest to do just that in her beautifully whimsical and intricate style. And I thought it would be great fun to chat with Hema about her illustrations and how they relate to her unschooling journey with her family. So to get us started, can you first share with us a bit about you and your family?
Sure, Pam. So maybe I'll give their ages. Raghu is almost 15 and Zoya is almost 12 in just a few weeks.
Wow!
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. And a long time ago, Raghu would stop us and say, how come you're not asked your ages? So I will say, Ravi is 50 this year, and I'm 43. And ever since then, I've always done that. If somebody asked my kids' ages and I was right there, I'd be like, and I'm 43. Just it's always something with Raghu that he would point out these things that adults do. So it stayed with me. Ravi was raised in India, actually. If I could just give a little background, yeah? So It gives a flavor for who we are. Ravi was raised in India, and I was raised in United Arab Emirates, which is a tiny little country in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. So we both were raised in different countries. I was exposed to Arabic and English and Kannada and Hindi at home. Ravi was exposed to Telugu and Kannada. So we were both basically bilingual, but our common language eventually became Hindi. So in our home, we have Hindi and English mostly. And further on, Ravi moved to the US when he was 22 and loved the US and pretty much always wanted to live here. I was studying in Bombay as an undergrad. I did my art there. I did my advertising years, some work. And then I joined a master's program in NYC, met Ravi, and just didn't look back. Settled down in New Jersey. So since then, since we had Raghu and Zoya, somewhere when the kids were 4 and 1, we moved to Singapore and then moved to Pune, which is another city in India, very close to Bombay, actually, which is now called Mumbai, by the way, to be correct. And then 4.5 years ago, we moved back to the US. So we've had a checkered sort of path, building communities as we traveled. And our unschooling journey was like all along, pretty much.
Wow.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, you got that's really cool to hear. So I've known you through various moves. I guess I didn't really, because mostly we connect online, right? So
yeah, that's right.
That's very cool. Okay, so now let's dive into the unschooling bit of your journey. And we're going to start with the first illustration you did, which is titled Ordinary World. And that appears in stage 1 of our journey, which is the call to unschooling. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how that image came about for you.
Yeah. So I want to say at the outset that when I read your book, and I found it so rich. And I was like, oh my goodness, she's visually made this book so rich. What am I going to bring to this? I can't possibly bring to it. It's so visually rich. And, short of illustrating the actual stories and mythological inspiration and the hero's path itself, I was wondering what would come to me. I really wondered for a little while, and I would sketch and doodle. And then all of a sudden, it became clearer to me that I am a hero right here. So is Ravi. So are my kids. We're heroes of our path. What does that journey feel like to us? And so it became, my own. And then I was like, wait a second, this is becoming clearer. So I kind of followed my feelings towards these illustrations, and they came from that space. I was not sure whether it would match your vision, and I was so thrilled when you felt the same and felt like, yeah, this works.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I love the experience of drawing this first image, because when it became clear to me years ago that Raghu came and changed our lives. It just overnight. I remember one night when he was an infant, and he was what, I don't know, 5 days old maybe, right? We were so scared to sleep right next to him, even though my mother, who, bless her, my God, she was with me through all those days. And she assured me, you will not roll over on your child. You will be fine. Like she was the attachment parenting extraordinaire who didn't know the term attachment parenting, but just knew from being her beautiful self that all is well. And this, Anyway, so both Ravi and I are sleeping at night. And this little baby, we put him down on the carpet. So we reduced our bed to just a king mattress, put him on a little beautiful bassinet right in front of our eyes in the center of the bed on the floor, so we could lie on our stomachs and watch him, because we were so scared that if we both fell asleep and he needed us, we wouldn't wake. And it was magical. There was something about that night that we both realized that that's it. Life is never, it's just some other being has entered here. I know all parents feel this, but I feel that connection then just kept growing. And I was like, oh my God, it never has to end. And so I always had a feeling that school hadn't worked out for me quite the way I wanted it to. So I did carry some school baggage, although I apparently did well at school, according to whatever my parents thought was well. But I didn't feel well. I felt like my learning was never complete. The bell was always ringing just as I got a concept in my head. And I had struggled with that. So when Raghu came along and I was fortunate. I was working from home. I did some teaching. I was already out of the stressful advertising world and into art. Oh my God, centering into my art and centering into Raghu and getting to know Ravi as this incredible man who would give me so much space and say, I will wake up and change his diapers any number of times. You just get your rest. And Ravi was working full time, doing his master's at that point at Fordham part-time. So he's like, I feel teary when I think about this, because I feel like that journey started on that footing. Mm-hmm. And then the more we thought about preschool as he got to 2.5, I'd never heard of unschooling home. Let alone home. I didn't even hear about homeschooling. So I felt, that the choices were school. Mm-hmm. I'd never actually questioned that. I wonder how I never did. But anyways, I never questioned.
Me neither.
Right? It was like, school was a given. And I remember sitting on the counter as, like a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old and always arguing with my parents, always giving them this gigantic spiel on how school was wrong and how it should be this and why can't they listen, and what's the point of this historic lesson versus learning what is going on in the world now, and all kinds of stuff. And my mother would just listen and listen and listen. And at the end of 3 hours of my tirade, she'd say, all right, and now you have school tomorrow, Hema. You got to go get ready. And I'd go right back, But I remember that dissonance that I had with the idea that somebody outside of me was going to tell me what to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think that had stayed with me over the years. And I'm just grateful. I feel like big forces work in my life outside of me even that have just guided me. I don't know. It's like from my gut. So my little cloud people in this illustration ordinary world are my gut. I don't know. It sounds like horrible. What a horrible comparison. Intuition. Intuition, yes. My intuition, my happy people who live in my head and tell me that change is awesome. Let's do more. Let's find this. Let's find that. Let's make this happen. And I think that journey started around the time Raghu was 2.5, went for a little preschool. He only went 3 days a week, only for 3 hours at a time. I was sitting right outside that door because he would refuse to be inside if he couldn't see me through the window. Mm-hmm. Now, this little preschool was the most delightful, beautiful little Montessori. The parents who ran it One of them was a rabbi. The other woman was my yoga teacher. And they were just beautiful. They were these women who were attachment parenting. So, what could go wrong, right? This was this amazing preschool that I found. And Raghu rejected it out. He played along. I will say the words are correct. Played along. Yeah. He's like, oh, you think I should be with these guys? Okay, because he trusted me, right? Mm-hmm. So along with it. And when I think about it, I now recognize, over the years, I recognize, my God, all he was doing was saying, oh, you think I should be with them? Okay, I'll give it a try. Wait a second, I don't like this. I don't like, and then it started to come up. One day he told me in the kitchen, I may have been a month into this preschool experience or two, and he said, can I go to school only on Fridays? Now, this is like just shy of 3 or around 3. And I said, oh, why Fridays? He said, oh, because that's the day we get to bake challah, which is the bread they make. On Fridays, they would do this beautiful little ceremony. They would get to drink grape juice. And I already had just discovered John Holt. I just discovered some alternate books. And the idea of homeschooling was on the periphery somewhere. I think I just bumped into it because Raghu also had severe seasonal allergies. And the naturopath we had, thank God, discovered at that point, had mentioned casually, oh, you don't have to stress him out with this school experience that he's not liking right now. You could homeschool. And I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. What? Where has this been all my life? Yeah. And so I began to see that little school. And in this image, you can see this little child looking at the bird through the window. And in the other window, you see a poster that depicts pretty much the same exact scene of the cliffs. And what you see in this image is on a poster inside, with children looking at the poster versus turned around and looking at the real world. And I think that's how I felt growing up. And as I saw Raghu's vision of this little school, he's understanding that, yes, they're very nice people, but I don't want to be here. I want to be out there. I built this beautiful bridge, but they don't want me to keep it up anymore. And I want to look at it tomorrow. And I'm like, second, we can do all of this and more at home. And I felt very competent that, I can handle this age. I mean, I wasn't sure about handling the rest of the years, but, I was just getting into it, thinking, this doesn't make any sense. And through his allergies, which is another gigantic story that if people are interested could look up, it's on my blog. And I made a little video chat even about it because I was so passionate about that topic, about how the allergies and my understanding that his little body knew what it needed from all the food groups of the world that I presented to him, and I didn't have to worry. So all of these little factors came together, and more and more school looked like this thing that was not the real thing. It was not, I don't want to call it fake because I am a product of school and I appreciate schools for what they bring to many families. I was just grateful that at that point, Ravi and I could choose homeschooling. We could choose to say, I don't need to work anymore. I could continue teaching a little here and there, but I was able to stay home, and that was huge. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. Everything started to make sense. I'm like, yes. I feel so good being with this little being who's so wise and would look at me and just question everything, which was my original spirit. That was me growing up. And it just zinged.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. And I this first picture, Ordinary World, always really hits me because I loved the way that you put the image inside, because that's what school's trying to do, right? Is trying to help kids learn about the real world while they're inside the school. But with that little girl looking outside the window and seeing it in real life that always gives me goosebumps.
Yes.
Yeah. But so now you know about homeschooling, and we're moving on to the next stage.
Yes.
Which is the actual choice, deciding that you're going to move ahead with that. And your next illustration, which is called Dreams, is a wonderful depiction of just how wide and open and exciting and brainstormy and the whole world's ahead of me.
Oh gosh, yes.
So Is that kind of what you were trying to get across? I mean, there's so many little details in this that
Thank you.
I really dive into.
Yeah. So dreams for me, or also known as, is homeschooling a thing? Where has this been all my life? That was the end in me. When I first stumbled upon Sandra Dodd's website, that's around the time when, because, once you look up the word homeschooling, it just is so, it's like anything else. You start thinking about a topic and the next thing you bump into 50,
Yes, exactly.
Reflections of it all over the place. And I loved it. I was like, I could not stop reading. He would fall asleep and I would read. And he would wake up and I would go to the library and find more books about it. And I immersed myself because I could not, it sang to me, is all I can say. For me, it was a heart connect. Because learning, it was interesting. Ravi and I, very early on, knew that the learning couldn't be stopped. You can't, it's so natural. Somebody said this to me, and I unfortunately haven't figured out who said this to me and where I got this, but somebody said to me, little children are like scientists, like doctors, scientists, visiting from outer space. And if you treated them with that, do you know who said that, Pam? I don't know.
No, I don't.
But I loved it. To me, it became like this little mantra, because when he would ask something, I would imagine like, look at this little being asking about the world, right? It was the most amazing journey for me to know that there were other families out there, that we could talk about anything under the sun now. We didn't have to live our life according to an external clock. So the research, at this stage, I started really thinking about how, what kind of environment am I building for this child? What's going on in my house? What does he like? What can we pursue? I love saying often that both my children have been raised in the same house with the same parents, same things, same everything, same opportunities. And they're so different, so unique. And I'm amazed that there was a time when I was all about books because Raghu was all about books. I loved books anyway, so I was always like collecting books. And I collected books just for the illustrations. There's a beautiful book by John Muth, M-U-T-H, I think, and it's called Zen Shorts. And Raghu loved that book. For whatever reason, even though I thought the stories were a bit, moralistic, but it was beautiful. I liked it. I did see there was a great spirit to it. He loved it. So I discovered that he loves the illustrations, he loves the stories, and I'm looking at all of these books. And then Zoya comes along and is like, books? What can I build with it? Can I make a house with this? Can we tear the out? Can we cut it up? Can we, completely different viewpoint of books. So I think at this phase in the illustration, to go back to the way I drew this, I felt like it's an immersion. It's like all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, my children are sleeping. I do not have to wake them up in time for anything. I can look at whatever I have in my house. I can look at what my child is gravitating towards. I can read all these incredible articles that, you, Pam, and Anne, and Anna, and Sandra, and so many articulate, amazing women, Urmila Sampson in Pune, and Dola, my friend. So many women have written and are writing still. And at that time, I think I was more immersed in Sandra Dodd's side because that's the one that gave me so many examples of families living in this way, that all of a sudden the world was my, what is it? Like my playpen, I don't know.
The world was my oyster?
Yes. I love Lissy's little tattoo coming in. I think it was her first tattoo, you said, Find Adventure.
Yeah. I love the way you worked that in.
Yes. I loved that, when we spoke about the illustrations and there were these little Easter egg moments that had begun to happen. And I was like, this is even better. It adds a richness. To me, Zoya is the mermaid. She's my butterfly, my mermaid. She's my reminder to have fun. Yes. Every time I say that, I think of Zoya and her language play. And she would say things like, the road is so grumpy. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh, she means it's bumpy, but she wasn't saying the word wrong. She meant the road was grumpy. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, I mean, with Raghu, when he was very little and Zoya was not quite with us yet, and it was whatever that phase, I think, and she was maybe a young baby, I think I was still caught up in Raghu's way of thinking, which was quite logical. He was very, construction oriented and fact oriented. So it was a very, it was a world that I understood because I grew up, I was like that as a child. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Zoya comes along and she's like, the road is grumpy. Ravi has crumbs. So Ravi will occasionally have his beard grow out and she would be like, oh, it's so many crumbs, Nana, so many crumbs. Her play of words and her way of her playfulness. I think that's it. There's so much playfulness. And her love for whales. I love that Lissy's little tattoo got worked in. I love that Raghu's he used to make these little jokes like miso hungry. And it's miso, like miso soup. Or, and the child in the tree, relaxing as I immersed. He no longer had to be something I needed him to be. He could just be and be himself. And I could be his partner, his facilitator, his companion. It was,
It's lovely because that is that next stage, right? You've discovered homeschooling and unschooling, and now there's just so many possibilities, right? And it's just bubbling up and bubbling up. Yes. And I love the Find Adventure for those who haven't heard the story yet. I'm sure I've told it on the podcast before, but that was always kind of Lissy's mindset. And when she turned 18 for her 18th birthday, she got the Find Adventure, a small tattoo.
Wow.
Just to remind her. And we were in Vegas when we did it because that's where she wanted to go for her 18th birthday.
Yeah.
So now we'll move on to drawing number 3. And that's, to me, it kind of represents now we found all this wonderful thing. And then I think it can start, we can start to get a little, I guess, scared, for lack of a better word, or pulling in, because we're like, okay, so how do we get this to mesh into our family? Like, how do we bring this into our lives? And for me, it was a huge shift to learning so much more about the people. Like you were talking about the differences between Raghu and Zoya, right? And it's learning about them individually. It's learning about unschooling and trying to figure out how we're going to mesh those exciting ideas into our actual day-to-day lives. So what kind of inspired you with this illustration, which is called Transitions?
Yes. I think in my mind, when this illustration came about, I had to go back to that phase. And I think in the book, it's close to a part called Embracing Beginner's Mind. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so perfect because I found myself doing this funny thing where I'd get up in the morning and felt like I was restarting all over again, like rebooting, like the computer. Mm-hmm. It's a little scary. Some of the times it was for me to wake up and realize that, wait, we have nowhere to go. We don't little kids go someplace when they're about 4 and a half? Aren't they supposed to all be somewhere? And oh my gosh, am I screwing this up? Should I be doing something? And then all of a sudden I'd get all frantic, and one fine day I'll take out a bunch of worksheets thinking I'm accomplishing something, and I would sit with Raghu, and for a little while it would be fun, and then suddenly he'd see oh, she has an agenda. Oh, what? And it would end in tears, frustration, not fun for anybody. And then I would heave a big sigh and go back to sleep, or we'd take a nap in the afternoon. I'd be like, oh, God, I just woke up and realized my life is great. Why am I messing around with it? And I needed the trust. So I definitely looked for stories. I am eternally grateful to the hundreds of women whom I found online sharing their just day-to-day moments of frustration, moments of what worked, what changed, how they felt. These women and men, of course, but I seem to connect with a lot of the women, wrote lots of bits of their unschooling journey. And I was piecing together a new visual, because I needed a visual to walk towards. Because until then, the only visual had been school, really alternate school, maybe Sudbury, but that was it. Maybe Waldorf. I had a fascination with some of the beautiful aspects of Waldorf. And every time I would bump into it, I'd be like, it's not working for me. And I'd walk away because Raghu was learning everything that Waldorfians, I'm generalizing here, I know there's many interpretations, everything Waldorfians said they shouldn't be using and doing and blah, 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 everything of that kind was exactly what Raghu wanted to do and see and blah, blah. So I was, okay, you know what, there's something not working. So I'm like, okay, go back to the center. So it's like a restart. And this night of transitions that I feel emanated in this image of just taking that moment. And it ties in so beautifully to saying, embracing the beginner's mind, restarting. When I felt shaken because I was like, oh my God, my child is not reading. Most kids are reading, because I would bump into somebody whose child was the same age and was reading. I'd bump into somebody and they'd have a different experience. And I'm like, oh my God, my child. I would even start comparing because comparison is so easy. It's so part of how I was raised. The whole school system is based on comparison and, how much do you know and how much does the other person know? And anyway, so I would bump into people and I would get a bit shaken up and I would start comparing notes even with other unschoolers thinking, oh my God, that unschooler knows how to do this. I should probably know that. And I had to go to the core. If we go down to what is the point of living like this? Why does it matter that what matters to Raghu is all that matters? I had to really go into that. And the more I got into it, I don't get me wrong, there were nights where I was worried. I even worried what Ravi was feeling because he didn't have as much time. We had moved to Singapore at this point, and I felt like I was responsible for my children's education. Were they turning out okay? Is everything going to be okay? I didn't quite find an unschooling group. I did find some friends, built a little homeschooling community around me, found people. But mostly I had to keep coming back to my children and just stop there and say, okay, Zoya loves water, mud, sand, and watching people and watching other children, not engaging as much. And I'm like, okay, all right, if we spend 4 hours at the playground, that's okay. But the idea that we had just spent 4 hours at the playground, is that learning? These were the things that I had to solidify a bit more inside me. See, in spirit, I got it. My spirit got unschooling. It never even connected with homeschooling because unschooling is where my spirit was. I got it. I had wanted that all my life. But all the parts of me that had gone through school, that had been raised by parents who were doing their best and saying, hey, we need you to learn this and this and this. And only if you learn this will you be successful in life. All of that was getting shaken up. And nights of transitions. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, yeah. It makes so much sense. And this stage, Joseph Campbell calls it the belly of the whale.
Yes.
Yes. Because, that is, we literally cocooned in our basement for the first 6 months because, like you said, you have to find a way to ignore, to move past those voices that make you want to compare, that knock you off your game,
yes.
And to focus on your children's voices, yes. and that whole the beginner's mind. That's why I called it that, because yes. That was where I had to be. I had to keep reminding myself that the things I thought I knew, mm-hmm. I wasn't comfortable with anymore. Yet I really had to find a place for all these wonderful new ideas that I had come across. But yeah, it takes that time, and it takes really, I just love that metaphor in the belly of the whale, because you need that space to yourselves, right?
Yes.
And then you talked about how you were figuring out or seeing the learning, right? Zoya spends 4 hours at the park, and where's the learning in there? Where's the learning in there? Because that leads so nicely into the next stage. Because now, as you're embracing this beginner's mind, you're learning about your children, you're starting to open up to all these new ideas. in your new world, right?
Yes.
So now we're moving into our new unschooling world.
Yes.
And the next stage I called challenging our beliefs about learning. This is kind of, I took the road of trials of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and I broke them into two areas, into learning and parenting, because those are two huge aspects of our journey, right? And I wanted to dive into each one individually. So with this one, we called it learning, which is awesome. And now we're playing out on that cliff, right?
Yes. The very cliff. It's the same world. The schools exist, everything. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, no, go. Yeah.
I loved that I went back to the cliff. I wondered, well, why was I staying so close to the water all the time?
Yeah.
And as you will see in a couple of images, there's a reason for it. But anyways, at this stage, I had to be in the same environment. It's not like I was taking my children and going away somewhere. I was still in the same environment. And I wanted that to translate into this image by being just on the same cliff, just playing and being right there, but outside doing what it is that we wanted in the same work. The learning and the parenting being separate, yes. So there's a small story here that while it's a story about reading, which is such a big deal to most of us, and it slowly has become a less of a deal for me, and I've learned so much why it's not that important. But I have to stay true to who I was way back when this early understanding of learning was happening for me, and I'm grateful for that moment, even though wait, let me tell the story. Okay. Zoya was in my little backpack, and I think she was snuggled up, and we were in the overland MRT system, which is like a overland subway, in Singapore. And Raghu loved these trains. He had memorized the stations. He knew the maps. I think he was about 4.5, going on 5 at that point. And we were at a station. The train stopped, and the woman, the announcer, said, Phoenix. And Raghu looked at me and said, she's wrong. Like, I love that. Okay, so he used to do this all the time, by the way. He would be just very like, that's not okay. That this is wrong. He had this very clear. So I look at him and say, that's not wrong. What she's saying is Phoenix, and that's what's written out there. And he said, nope, that's Phoenix. So first of all, blown away that this kid had, at some point in this transition where I was not paying attention at all to traditional learning, had started reading of some kind. And I was, wow, he said Phoenix. I said, well, PNH, by that time the train had started moving, and I said, PNH makes the sound for Raghu. So, like in, and I was about to say something, and he says, oh, like in coelophysis. And I'm like, what just happened? I started reeling. And of course, he was off and he was playing and jumping on the poles or doing something. And I called up Ravi. I was like, Ravi, I don't know when this happened, but this kid knows apparently words and has been reading in some form or fashion. And it really, while it's a very, it's nice to have that early home, it's that success, right? It's like, oh, my kid started to read. I didn't have to do it. I mean, I'd like to say, immediately contrast that with Zoya, who is reading only just now, and that also in spurts, like she's getting into it now, and she's now soon to be 12. She has taken her own time, and I want to say, I learned that my delight could be equal in her kind of learning. It's so different. To Raghu, words mattered. I remember in a library once, he was running and I had to stop him. And very often with Raghu, I had discovered a big word would stop him. At that point, I think I had just learned it. I said, hey, Raghu, there's a book here. And I just quietly kind of pulled him away because I could make out somebody or the other was going to stop him from running in the library. And he said, what? I said, hippopotamus. There's a book on hippopotamus. And he's like, what's that? And oh my gosh, and ever since, actually, his connection to vocabulary and words and what they mean and the nuances. So that was an early start that, today is who makes him who he is. While Zoya's learning was of a different kind. So I also learned at that point that what I thought was important to be learned was still ingrained in me. I still felt like reading was important and writing was important and blah, blah, blah. And everything was getting shattered because my lovely, incredible Zoya pretty much looked at me and said, no. And I was like, okay, I guess she doesn't like this. This is not going to work for reading in bed was misery for her because Raghu loved to be read to every night without fail, even during the day. Sometimes, like as soon as she fell asleep, he would just be waiting, read, And to Zoya, that was the most annoying thing ever. So we always had to have a big box of toys on the floor, and her learning was with her hands. Pulling things apart, making things work, splashing in water and putting unusual things on the house in the tub to see what would happen. Figuring out that the taps worked both ways and you could get burnt with the hot water, which I don't know why she would keep trying just to see. Is it still going to be hot water? Is it
still hot?
Yeah. And her learning was completely different. And I was like blown away. And I'm like, is this normal? Is this what happens when we don't force them to learn to read, write, put labels, blah, blah, blah? You know what I mean? It just mine. And learning of all kinds, slowly. I cannot say that what I speak today is who I was. I feel like it was in spurts. Every day I learned a little more. I got a little better. I would take stock sometimes and stop because it was too much. It was like, wait, halt. I'm not ready for this next big thing, whatever it was. Zoya wanted to jump into pools without her floats. How do I support that? That's really hard. So I had to learn a lot of skills. And then I saw that the learning was rich and unique. And the more I could support that, the more they could be true to who they are. And the more I could question which skills are, what is mandatory? What is required in life? And I'm like, oh my God, at the very basic level, all that's required is they be happy, know how to get what they need, speak to me, figure stuff out, find what they need in life, and I can always be there to help. And I'm like, wait a second, that seems like a recipe for some kind of success. I remember thinking like this when I was a kid, and yeah, I don't know. I think I've gone a bit off track, but...
No, those are amazing examples of this whole point, right? That whole stage, we are questioning, what is it that they really need to learn,
yes.
So that we can get so comfortable with the fact that curriculum and directing it really isn't necessary. And then seeing how you saw with the reading stories that you shared, just how completely different people's learning styles can be when they're free to just approach things however they want, right?
Yes.
And yet you still see her learning amazing things in her own way. So I think that's what I love about unschooling, and what is so hard about unschooling is that everybody's journey is so different.
Yeah.
You had those two children, right? So they had you questioning those things. They gave you those examples, and you had your own experience with school. And then another parent will have had a different experience in their own lives growing up, and will have different children. So different things will come up for them, right? But this stage still happens for everybody. It just can look very different, can't it?
No, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the next illustration that you did, which is called New Perspective, which I love, and I think, yes, this is definitely one of my favorites. I have a water thing too, and this one just kind of hit me in the soul as well. And this stage, so this would be the other part of the road of trials, if we're looking at the hero's journey stages.
Yes.
And I called this shifting from control to connection. So this is the parenting aspect as well. And I would love to hear some of your thoughts behind this one.
Yes. So throughout, like we said, we both, while these illustrations were coming to be, we had these little Easter egg moments, right? You were feeling for the water. We were feeling for, various little things. The mermaid, who is not in this image, actually this image is one of the images where we don't have anybody except this little child. And I just want to share that in the previous image, we have the mermaid, playful, the parrot out there. And I felt like the mermaid is my reminder to play. The parrot was my reminder to stay light and fly. And the cloud people were my intuition. And there's a grandpa and grandma just always on the peripheral somewhere, because that was a part of our experience. Our experience was that our family was incredibly unaware of what this crazy journey was, but then we were already the crazy people in the family. So they were all like, oh, well, they're just themselves. So it was okay. But yes, they're a big part of it. And I want to bring that to this new perspective, the road of trials, because I want to say that I had to really look at life from my child's perspective. In this image, it's just one child, because that one perspective matters so much. For me, I saw Zoya connecting with my mother-in-law, connecting with my parents, and that was her learning. And I had to look at that. I had to find a way to see that, wow, while Raghu was interested in, who were the Mayans and what's going out what was history, when did, man first appear, what was evolution? These were his kind of questions. Meanwhile, Zoya is all about can I paint your nails? Can I do this? Why are your nails? And, she would notice things about their body. She would ask them questions, and they responded. To their credit, I have to say, they responded beautifully. And it allowed me a different perspective. I think they played along with her because Zoya is such a playful force that anybody in her vicinity is just going to have to play, because she's just like that. And I think the grandparents just could see that, oh my God, look at this one child who asks us these questions about why am I at the altar? Why is this ceremony in this way? And all these questions. So, and we have this other child who's, Zoya once just sat in my mother-in-law's kitchen and watched her make puris, which are these little flat things made out of dough that we fry and they puff up. And she just sat there and ate them and watched. And it was Zen-like. It was like, what is this? This is beautiful. It's like I could see, I had new perspective, new insights that there's a different vision of the world within my child. And I'm just, I'm being invited for the ride, Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I had to go from controlling what that outcome was with the grandparents or with the environment to connecting with my child, for which I needed to see it from their point of view, which I didn't always succeed at. I did not always get what they were trying to do. And then I learned a lot more. And I think you write much more beautifully about this in this book. There's so many ways to describe all these nuances and these skills that we can pick up so that the trust becomes deeper. I want to mention that around this time, I feel like we were in India. We'd just settled into Pune. Our experiences were expanding, but I still had to stay true to my children in a new cultural environment, in an environment that I had not actually lived in except as a student, which is a very different experience of any country. So living there with a family, I got to see things in new light. My mother-in-law was so sweet. There would be moments where Raghu was just hammering at burnt bits of rock and charcoal and stuff, and there'd be like a black mess all over her balcony. I mean, she didn't bat an eyelid. I mean, to me, it makes me teary even today when I think of those moments where she just was like, yeah, of course. He wants to hammer something. I mean, I don't think they could see it. So don't get me wrong, if you ask them, so was that part of the unschooling? It's not that. They just connected with the spirit of the child. I saw more and more of that in India, and I'm ever grateful for that in that society. And
that's amazing.
I've included a picture in this little bunch of photos that I'm hoping can be shared. I think we could share the picture of my mother just sitting on the floor with a tiara kind of thing made of flowers and a gigantic dupatta, which is like this cloth that we wear over our shoulders over certain Indian outfits. And she has this all over her head. And it was a moment in time that it just such a capture of who my mom is for Zoya in sitting and just playing and being who Zoya wants her to be. There's another one where Zoya pretty much made my parents students in a school. Now, she has no idea what school is, but so this was the perspective. Like, I began to see that, and even I think I'm backtracking to learning here for a moment, to say that the learning is in all of this. Meanwhile, Raghu was involved in GTA. He's just 3 years older than Zoya. And he was in the front room playing GTA and talking to me about the nuance of the game and how he had to do this in order to get this. And what's the math in this? Like, how can I get this much money? What do I need to do? I mean, my Zoya is like, okay, you are my students. And now we're going to have lunch. We have to go fix lunch, mama. Let's go. That's what she calls my mom. And the road of trials, I feel, is a beautiful way to say that I didn't always see everything as some smooth, beautiful garden that I was in. It was like, it was full of awakenings for me. Mm-hmm. Every time I chose the connection, which was not always, I keep saying this just to say that it's a huge growth. You can get unschooling in your spirit and still struggle with the day-to-day, which I think might tie into parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean this is to me where I'll pick words.
Yes.
Where the rubber hits the road. So it's when you're trying to bring all your intellectual understanding of unschooling and figuring out, number one, how to be an unschooling parent with your children, but also observing and seeing how unschooling, this lifestyle is unfolding with your children, and you're learning from them. You're learning so much from them, right? And like you said, that's why I love the road of trials, because it's like, because so many of these things are counter to what we've been told to expect, right? And our relationships are so different than the relationships with our children that we're told we're supposed to have, that control, that power, that we know best,
Oh, yeah.
So, these are definitely, I talk about whether these are your monsters, what are the particular things that come up for you. Like in each of those stages, the learning and in the parenting, I talk about 5 truths. In each of those, that were ones that I struggled with, ones that I needed to learn about, needed to work through. Right. And that's what the other piece I love is the book is the Hero's Journey book by Joseph Campbell is called The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Yes.
Right? Because there's just so many different ways through it. It's very personal to every single person.
Yes.
And my favorite thing about this illustration is this new perspective is it's jarring in that you're looking from underwater, right? And you're looking up at this girl, and it's just such a cool perspective. The moment you're like, hey, what's up here for a second, right? Me anyway, I was trying to position myself. I'm like, hey, where am I, right?
Yeah.
So that knocks you off for a second, and then to realize where you are, and then to see the child in her joy. And I love her T-shirt. Her T-shirt says me, because this is, watch me.
Yes.
My perspective, what I choose, what I'm doing, this is valuable. And just all that, like in an illustration, it all comes out. That always amazes me. See, my art is words. And that's what I love so much of working with you is your art is visual. And it's just amazing to see all the different connections that come up between the words and the art.
No, absolutely. I thank you for speaking about it like this, because I couldn't have worded it how you did just now. It's beautiful.
Oh. Yes, it's been fun. Okay, we should probably move on. And that wraps up part 1 of my conversation with Hema. I look forward to meeting you back here next week for part 2. Have a great week. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to check out the first book in my Living Joyfully with Unschooling series, Free to Learn, 5 Ideas for a Joyful Unschooling Life. In it, I share the 5 paradigm-changing ideas that most help me better understand unschooling. Reviewers have said, a quick read, but packed with ideas that challenge the dominant paradigm of our failing approach to learning, this little gem makes an excellent argument for unschooling. And I was rather doubtful about this book, as I had never heard of the author, but after reading it, I wish that I had read it years ago. I hope you find it helpful too. Free to Learn has also been translated into French and Spanish. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.